started. Welcome again. So today's webinar and panel discussion introduces some on-the-ground experience of energy and zero carbon step code by a group of panelists from across the province and our step code specialist, Mark Bernhardt. So we'll just jump right into the session. I'm joining you this morning from the Kootenay region in the community now known as Nelson. So this area is the traditional territory of the Snayaks Nation, the Ktunaxa Nation, and the Silks Nation, who have stewarded these lands since time immemorial. So living here, I'm constantly reminded of the depth of relationship to land and place, and it's something that I continue to learn from and reflect on in both my personal life and in this work. And I want to acknowledge my immense gratitude to the generations of stewardship of these lands and express my appreciation for the knowledge systems and practices that have sustained these lands for generations. I'm hopeful that as building industry evolves, there are meaningful opportunities to learn from and integrate those perspectives into how we build and care for our communities. So we do like to start our sessions by recognizing Indigenous leadership in the built environment space. So the Shíshálh Nation's traditional territory is located on the Sunshine Coast of BC between what is now known as Jarvis Inlet and Howe Sound. And in 2023, 59 homes in Port Moody on the Lower Mainland were slated for demolition in preparation for the Inlet District Redevelopment Project. The Shíshálh Nation acquired 10 of these homes that were identified by the company Renewal Development as suitable for rescue, relocation, and repurposing. And in 2024, the homes were relocated by truck and barge to Shíshálh, where they underwent energy efficiency upgrades and renovation to create two-story intergenerational homes within the nation's Selma Park subdivision project. And where possible, the upgrades were completed using existing cabinetry and appliances from 49 homes that could not be salvaged. And then through the leadership and collaboration between the Shíshálh Nation, Renewal Developments, and West Group Properties, this project saw multiple co-benefits helping to address the nation's housing crisis, support Indigenous families and elders, reduce costs, limit waste and embodied carbon, and reduce the need for new materials. So you can learn more at the bottom. There's a link at the bottom of the slide there. All right, so today's session will be a combination of a presentation and panel discussion. So in the first half of the session, Mark Bernhardt, president of Bernhardt Contracting Limited and the CEO of Energy Code Solutions, will provide a quick overview of both Energy Step Code and Zero Carbon Step Code, with about 15 minutes at the end of the presentation for questions from you folk on the call. And in the second half of the presentation, we'll shift into a panel discussion. So Mark will be joined by a fantastic group of panelists, bringing practical insights into their approach for implementing Energy Step Code and Zero Carbon Step Code in their work. And then, as I mentioned, we'll also be polling you all for feedback on this morning's session, so keep your eyes peeled for that. All right, a quick introduction to who we are as an organization. As I mentioned, I'm a Built Environment Initiatives Coordinator with the Community Energy Association. And for those of you who may be newer to our work, CEA is a nonprofit that partners with local government and Indigenous communities across BC to support practical climate and energy solutions. And a big part of our work focuses on helping the construction industry adapt to rising energy performance expectations. So that includes everything from training and capacity building to coordinating conversations like this one, where we can share lessons learned and hear directly from industry. So we've been delivering high performance building training since 2017, working alongside industry associations, educators, and practitioners to make sure content is grounded in real world experience and not just theory. So if you'd like to stay connected to future sessions or resources, you can find upcoming events at communityenergy.ca/events, or you can register for our high performance building newsletter, which you will see a link in the chat for that registration shortly. All right, and then one more slide from me. Just before I pass things along to our speaker, I do want to emphasize again that our priority is to create a safe space for all folk on today's webinar. So we have zero tolerance for any kind of harassment towards our staff, speakers, and other attendees. And we reserve the right to remove anyone from today's session who does not adhere to these webinar guidelines. So have a quick look. And then with that, actually, Mark, I will start doing a quick poll just to we wanted to kind of have an idea of everyone's kind of knowledge with and experience with step code. So I can run that poll pretty quickly, and then I'll pass things over to you. How does that sound?
Sounds good. Works for me.
All right. So let's get this. So there's just a couple questions here. You'll see that pop up on your screen. And then while you're answering those questions, I'll just give you a little bit of a background on our speakers. So Mark Bernhardt is the president of Bernhardt Contracting and CEO of Energy Code Solutions. He's a registered energy advisor and passive house consultant and has spent a significant amount of time and energy helping BC's building industry prepare for step code and higher performance buildings. So if you have if you've heard anyone speak to step code, it was probably Mark. He is our kind of step code guru in the province. All right.
Biggest loudmouth about it, at least, anyway.
He's got a lot to say. We're going to hear it all. Okay, great. It looks like there's still a couple people answering this question. I'm just going to let it run for a few more seconds, and it's just to kind of give us a bit of a starting point here.
Yeah, it looks like we've got a good mix there. A few people not that familiar, a few experienced people, and a few people with basic. It's nice mix there. So I recognize a lot of the names in the list. So I think there's a number of people here that have seen me do this before. And for those people, we're going to speed run this. For the people that are a bit newer, hopefully we'll be able to convey something. And for those that have seen it before, but maybe forgot some things, maybe it'll be a bit of a reminder.
And just a reminder too, folks, we will have time after Mark's presentation for your questions. So if these are newer concepts to you, we can go back and kind of review something that Mark has introduced that's maybe new to you. Right. With that, Mark, I'll pass things over to you.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks for that introduction and welcome again to everyone here. This is going to be a very quick Step Code 101 with the aim of having us all sort of speak in the same language for our panel discussion coming up. So to start with, the energy step code is a performance-based code, and that differs from the prescriptive-based codes that we have traditionally seen and have been the tradition of the building industry for a long time. And the difference there is like a prescriptive code says, well, you must have your wall studs at this spacing on center, this many nails in each stud, and so on and so on. It's very specific about what you need. The performance based codes, by contrast, say, well, this wall needs to hold the roof up and be strong. And how you do that is kind of up to you, as long as you can prove that you did it. And the advantage of that is that it allows us to innovate, to try new things, and to do something that we maybe wouldn't ordinarily be allowed to do, but still performs the purpose and perhaps saves us cost, saves us energy, does a few different things. So that's what we're aiming for with this type of performance-based code. We're hitting a goal, not necessarily a specific thing. And right now in BC, the step minimum is step 3. That puts us halfway up the ladder. There was, I should say, a schedule published on how fast we might move up that ladder. That schedule is perhaps a bit out of date now. We are not moving as fast up that ladder. The political mood, perhaps we might not move very quickly at all up this ladder, depending on how things go over the next little while. Some municipalities have moved faster because that is an option they are given, but the majority of the province is still at that middle level, step 3. As far as this code goes, there are 3 main categories that we have to hit, and we have to hit one of these metrics in each of the categories. We don't have to hit every metric in each of the categories. We just have to hit one of them. There's a group of metrics for air tightness. That's the air leakage from the home. There's systems and equipment, sometimes also known as total energy. And now I'm doing a very Part 9 specific, so that's the smaller buildings specific presentation here, like 6 plexes and less. If you're doing larger buildings, the Part 3 buildings, then you would see that category labeled as total energy. We'll get into a little bit of the difference coming up. And then there's building envelope targets as well. There is also a prescriptive pathway that is available for step 3 only. It is not available for step 4. And I'll start with that, and then we'll come back to those performance-based things. I guess I should also mention that there are 2 different types of metrics within some of these things that we're going to get into. There is percent better metrics when you're comparing to a theoretical house, and there is absolute metrics that are measuring energy use per square meter of floor area. And they're quite different in how they produce results, and we'll get into that. Starting with the prescriptive here, this was put in by popular demand, as they say. I'm not sure it's very popular. In fact, I don't know of hardly anybody doing this. Nobody in their right mind would do this, in my opinion. because the requirements are quite high. So here we're looking at zone 6. You do need a glazing of 1.22, which is not a crazy window. You can still get that in a double glazed, but it is significantly higher than what we see in the performance path, R80 in the attics and things like that. So it is quite a lot for the prescriptive pathway. There's also no flexibility. The R values are generally quite a bit higher than what we'd see in the performance path. And it focuses on areas like windows and foundations where it's a little harder to screw up. So if you've got a builder that maybe isn't as up on the science of things, you can relatively safely put in a better window, but building a very thick wall may be a problem for a less experienced builder. And I was on the committee that designed this, and the words that the committee members, who were in fact builders, used were things like, it should be punitive because you shouldn't, if you have any reasonable access to an energy advisor, that should be the trail, the pathway that you take. And that is how it has come out. It does tend to be quite expensive. Now, real side note here, this does not apply unless your municipality has adopted it. So there are a few municipalities across the province that have adopted it, not a ton, mostly in that sort of more rural areas where they have felt that it was necessary. But it does not apply unless it's been adopted by bylaw. And a quick little side here of why you probably wouldn't want to do it, and I don't think any builder in their right mind would. When we look at average windows in, at step 5 in climate zone 6, we are seeing average windows being used at about a U value of 1.34. That's worse than what we see in the prescriptive pathway. So if you want to make step 5 for less money, you go performance pathway. And keep in mind that the prescriptive pathway is only available for step 3. And that trend continues across all climate zones. It is much easier to do it with a performance pathway. So now that we all like the performance pathway and are going to start working with an energy advisor, this is how you're going to do it. You're going to, the builder is going to give the energy advisor a set of plans. That energy advisor is going to do an energy model on that set of plans. It's basically just a bunch of fancy calculations, enter it into the computer. Computer spits out a bunch of results. Those results will go into a report. That report will go to the city. The city hopefully will approve it in a very short amount of time. Sometime, hopefully mid-construction, you're going to give your energy advisor a call and say, hey, we're just about to put the drywall on. We'd like to test this house and make sure we're going to get the result we want. And your energy advisor is going to do a mid-construction blower door test. Now, technically, that one is not required. However, exceptionally good idea because it's cheap and easy to fix things at that point. Very expensive to fix things when you've already got cabinets on the walls and things like that. So after you've done that, you're going to go complete your building. Your energy advisor is going to come back. Ideally, not the day you want occupancy. Give us a couple days, that sort of stuff, right? But energy advisor is going to come back and do the official blower door test, which is the end one. And hopefully that's just a formality because you've already done the mid-construction test and you're pretty confident you've got it. From there, they're going to generate a report that's going to go into the city, and it's kind of job done at that point. So relatively easy, a few touch points throughout the project and real good quality control through the midpoint. That report that your energy advisor is going to generate looks something like this. At least page 2 of it looks something like this. And folks in industry really need to pay attention to this page in particular. Because the insulators and the framers need to know a lot of the information that's on this page. You need to know, this is where I'm going to write down what I put in my energy model. And if my energy model doesn't match what you build, there could be a problem. Your plans should also match this. Many municipalities will reject your application if your plans do not match this, which it comes from experience of people perhaps not watching this form. So window people are going to need to know things there. There's some things for the siding. Maybe if you're doing an exterior air barrier, HVAC folks need to know what's going on in that area. So my recommendation for all people working in industry is that your quoting packages, your bid packages should all go out with this form so that your trades have that information. So starting into the actual targets, then the envelope targets, we're going to start with those absolute targets here, starting with the TEDI. This is the heat gains minus the heat losses divided per square meter of floor area. primarily affected by, geometry, design, and, insulation and stuff. And things like that. And basically what it is we add up the losses, like you lose heat from the walls, the windows, the slab, the attic, and the ventilation. And then we add up the gains. We get some free energy from the sun. We got some internal gains from people cooking and doing things, like a dog produces 70 watts of heat, depending on the size of your dog. And there's some mechanical waste heat coming off the hot water lines. What's left over is the heating demand. That's that artificially generated heat. And that is the TEDI, which we divide per square meter of floor area. And what we're trying to do at step 5 is chop that in half. So we want to take that down and chop it in half. A few different ways we can do that, right? We can insulate the walls a bit more, reduce the losses. We can also increase the solar gains as well. That has other consequences. So there's a few different strategies, a number of different ways we can do it. But that's what we're trying to do, is chop that artificially generated heat in half. Now, what's wrong with just whacking a whole bunch of insulation at it? The answer is, well, like sometimes nothing, but we do run afoul of things like embodied carbon if we just insulate the heck out of a house, right? So there is a bit of a balance to be had there, and there is a diminishing return, right? So walls, for example, some houses might see a good return on insulating all the way past R30. In some cases, not. The house that this graphic came from, they really start to flatten out around R25. So for them, it wasn't worth insulating past R25. They're just not saving anything at that point. So there is a limit to what is worth insulating. And what it's telling us is, well, we've got bigger fish to fry. Let's go focus on something else. Maybe that's the windows. Maybe it's, the attics, the slab, whatever it is. And those sorts of things the math on that is not particularly difficult to do. And your energy advisors can help you guide. And that's one of the main roles of an energy advisor, is to guide you to where should you spend your money. And when we look at that across the province, we've got a data set here of provincial houses, about 5,000 houses in this data set. And the gray is the entire data set of all homes. And the colored ones at the bottoms are the homes that met step 4 and 5. And what we see when we look at their average R values is that the most common R value for a wall at step 5 across the province is actually a 16-inch on center wall with R22 bat in that wall. Now, as you go north, up to Shay's area and Angel's area, that's probably more likely an R24, maybe a little bit more than that. But certainly in the climate zone 4, 5, and lower 6, it's R22 in those walls. So we're not seeing, crazy high R values in most homes. In fact, when we look at the same sort of data in a different way, what we're seeing is that the bottom gets cut off in terms of R values. We're not seeing the really low ones anymore, but there isn't a huge difference in the high R values. Sure, a couple of crazies way out in front there every now and then, always some of those in every crowd, but really we're not seeing a huge difference in those upper R values. What we are seeing is a huge difference in their surface area. And this is really the key to how to build high performance on the energy step code. There is a very high difference in surface area for those homes. And interestingly, if these homes down here that have this high level of compactness, or that are very low surface area homes, all they have to do to get up a level was do better on the air leakage, and they would have gone up. So it's relatively easy to move up a level if your house is a compact form. What that looks like in sort of design, here if we take two same size houses and give one a high surface area and one a low surface area and start throwing options at it, well, you can see the shift, right? Both houses having the same options shifts way down the ladder there. With the low surface area house having lots of options up in step 5, probably there's a reasonably affordable one there. With the high surface area house barely making it into step 4, and those are probably the wing nut options that you wouldn't realistically build. So it's really all about that surface area more than the insulation, and that is really one of the big lessons learned of the early parts of step code, is that it is very much that design. So if you want to fail your TEDI and those envelope targets, this is what you do. You put lots of windows on the north, and you make yourself a crazy shape. This is how you make one of those really expensive step code horror stories. And then we can throw as many options as we want at this house, but it's never going to make it. And so anytime you hear those horror stories about it costing $1 bajillion to get to step code, it's probably a house like this versus a house like this that is, properly affordable house. This one, we threw 11,000 some odd options at it, and we couldn't get it lower than step 4. So relatively easy to do with a simple sort of house. Moving on to the mechanical now, and yes, this is a single family home mechanical room here, just your average type of home there. It's one of two in this particular house. So the difference here is that now we call it MUI, or mechanical energy use intensity, because it includes the mechanical systems, again, divided per square meter of floor area. It does include TEDI. So these two metrics do talk to each other, right? That artificially generated heat is included in the MUI. And that's kind of why we will often talk about it, particularly with our clients, as like total-ish energy. It doesn't include occupant loads. And the main reason it doesn't is because there is no average family. In a larger building, it's called TUI, or total energy use. And that's because if you've got 100 suites in a building, you can predict an average family. You can average it. But in a single family home, you can't do that. So we exclude the occupant loads. Now, this one, hopefully fairly straightforward for how this metric works, right? Fuel choice is not mentioned in step code, but physics is a little bit hard, right? And burning of fossil fuels is not as efficient as using a heat pump. So theoretically, you can use whatever you want in the fuel, but the math gets hard for less efficient systems, right? So it really does favor a heat pump. Electric baseboards are generally fine. Gas furnaces also generally fine because it's just not that strict. But as we go further up the steps, up to step 4 and 5, we start to see those fall off because the math on that just gets hard. At least we see them fall off as a single unit, like only a gas furnace. We definitely still see a lot of the dual energy. As far as hot water goes, it's the same sort of thing, right? Your low, older style efficiency gas tanks are kind of on their way out. Mid efficiency works just fine. We see a lot of those. High efficiency, if you've gotten yourself into trouble, maybe you've got that bad shape or something like that, you're inefficient, you have to go to the heat pump tank, or your client's just got something to prove, then we're seeing those heat pump tanks. We're generally not seeing these in like the spec build type of houses. They're just more efficient than they need. Moving on now to the other type of metrics here, the percent better metrics. These are very different in terms of how they measure from the absolute metrics. The absolute metrics, we are measuring actual energy use. The percent better, we are just comparing your house to a theoretical house. We often refer to it as a fairy tale house because it is made up. And the headline on it is that it is your house but built to minimum code. That's not quite true because it does redistribute windows and give you the same type of mechanical system. So annoyingly, if your house has a heat pump, the house you're comparing to also gets a heat pump. So you don't get to compare to like the worst possible system. I'm not sure that would be fair either. But this is based on the EnerGuide reference house, which is really designed for rebates and stuff. In my opinion, should never have made it into code, but that's a whole nother rant for another day. So the idea with this thing here is that if you have, say, a standard wall which has an effective R value of R15, you add 7.5 R values to the outside with some exterior insulation, that's 50% better. That's the theory. But the where this falls down a little bit, and really need to caution a lot of builders and designers about this, is that if you're 50% better than garbage, you're still 50% garbage, right? If you are 50% better than pretty good, what's 50% better than pretty good is like super excellent. And the level of extra that you have to add to go from pretty good to super excellent is very high compared to the level of effort from going from total garbage to not as much total garbage, right? So, it's like getting the difference between getting a C and a B in school versus getting an A and an A plus. It's quite a significant amount of extra work. And so that's where this metric gets really difficult. And we do see people run a little bit afoul of that sort of concept if they're trying to target this particular metric. And one of the things that causes that is that the reference house does some funny things with windows. It will never have more than 22% window on any one side and will never have less than 17. So it will take your windows distribution that might look like this on your compass and do that. And so it'll redistribute those windows. And now your house might have a ton of north-facing windows, which is not great for energy use anyways. But now you're comparing to something that has a whole lot of south-facing windows and getting a lot of free energy. If you're sort of off to the side like that, it might be a little bit of a wash. Something like this, maybe you could do no wrong and you'll get a free pass to doing anything. Don't even have to insulate your attic. So some funny business going on there. And it feels sometimes like it's unpredictable. It is predictable, but there's a lot of sort of intricacies of it. And this can have some serious consequences when we're talking about like a subdivision. And this is why we don't see a lot of subdivision type homes using this metric, and particularly because they tend to be boxier homes anyways and don't need it. But if you have a house that's on the south side of the subdivision with all the windows in the south, you could probably do no wrong. Probably pretty cheap to build that house. The north house is not getting any of that free sun, and it is comparing to a house that is. So potentially kind of a problem there. Okay, moving on to air leakage now. There's 3 different metrics we could choose from here. ACH, which is the air changes per hour, total volume of this room leaking out, how many times per hour. The NLA, normalized leakage area, and NLR, normalized leakage rate. That's how big is your hole and how much air is going through that hole. The ACH is a ratio of volume, so it favors a large house. The NLA, NLR is a ratio of surface area, so it favors a smaller house. They were added to take away some disadvantages that like garden suites and things had. Why we need NLA and NLR, they calculate sort of off each other. Good question. Probably just because we needed a more complex code. There might have not been enough words in the code or something like that. But really, they both do essentially the same thing. So, I'd argue that we could probably drop one of those. But here we are with 3 because why not? So why does this matter so much? Well, if you've got a house that is leaking air at 4 ACH 4 times per hour, that means your furnace has to reheat that air 4 times per hour versus a house that only has to reheat the air 1 times per hour. That's at that step 5 target, that 1 ACH. So it does make a significant difference. It's also a really good way to quality control a house, right? There's very few things that somebody shows up and independently actually tests with a machine. Air leakage is one of them. When you have air leakage, you also have high risk of mold and all sorts of other stuff. So it's a very good independent sort of verification of what's going on with the house. Secrets to success in air leakage here are really, simple designs and sort of figuring it out in advance. If you've got all sorts of complex transition, how are we going to do that? Designers in the room, if you can't draw it, how do you expect me to build it? And if we can do something like this, like draw that red line around the plan, and you can do that in design, then probably we're going to have good success in the building process. Oops, went too far. And often the cheapest solution is the best solution. This is what a 0.8 ACH at mid-construction looks like. This is a builder here in Victoria that consistently hits that. You can see how clean and nice that work is. But also they've done things like this that are relatively cheap. This is a piece of tin with 4 couplers put through it that you can easily attach to and caulk to. So they're not only are their HRV installs very slick looking, they're just very airtight as well. There's no sort of dangly flexy pipes running through there at all. I'll contrast that to what 4.6 looks like at mid-construction. Here is where a builder has done things like, not really paid attention to the details. This tape isn't stuck down. There's big cracks in this wood. They've, done something funny with the poly. Pretty easy to avoid stuff like that. And then, we got to ask the question, well, does this really matter, right? Our electricity is so clean and blah, blah, blah. Does this really matter is sort of the question we get a lot. Well, it does in a few different reasons here. Now, if we look at a house, a normal house, it's sort of performance curve of how much energy it uses, right? You'll have this sort of graph of like cold snap and the energy use spikes up, and maybe it's a heat wave too. Energy spikes up as we turn on air conditioning. A high performance home is going to cut that down, right? It's going to cut down those peaks. And that means we only have to generate, a fraction of the electricity. So this is a massive savings for us as a society for us paying the rates of BC Hydro. If BC Hydro has to go build out a whole bunch more infrastructure, that's expensive for us. And we don't want them to do that. We want our houses to be stable and steady, and that allows them to build out way less infrastructure. If you look at this graph, we can add another entire house to this same energy use that a potentially like a much leakier home would have to use. So it does have a significant impact on us, and that also leads to better resiliency. So this house is going to cool down a lot slower when the power goes out, and so you can stay in your home longer. Same thing in the heat wave, so it makes a much more comfortable home. So there's a lot of reasons to do it that are not necessarily just the environment and such. That then always leads to the question of, well, if we electrify everything, are we going to run out of power? We're going to die cold in the dark. Well, some would like us to believe that, but I would encourage everybody to take a look at page 86 of the Clean BC review. In particular, this is something that's been getting a lot of headlines lately about how BC had to import power, and really that's an incorrect statement. We did import power a number of the last few years. But we could have generated ourselves. The reason it was imported is because that was cheaper to do. So when we get cheap power from down in the States, we can shut off the dams or slow them down, fill them up, and have them really nice and full for the dry summer. And then when power is really expensive and the Americans are really willing to buy it like crazy, well, we can run those dams faster and sell it to them for twice the price. And what it has meant is that Canadian or BC power rates are 10% lower than they would have been otherwise. And so, I mean, who doesn't like ripping off American power customers, right? Like this is a great thing for BC, and BC Hydro has a whole spin-off organization called PowerX, and their whole job is to make money on power, selling it to other people, not BC residents. So it is generally a good thing when we're importing power. That means we're probably buying it for pennies on the dollar. In terms of the capacity as well, the latest predictions of how much power we're going to use by 2030 are somewhere around like 10 to 20 or 15 to 20%, depending on how many data centers show up and things. So we're going to see some growth. Where are we going to get that power? Well, Site C added 8%. That's already operating. They did a call for power number 1, which added another 5%. They actually received 3 times more power applications than they needed. A number of those are now in construction or almost complete. There was a call for power number 2, which added another 9%, and again, receiving more than what they needed. And then 2% is going to come from energy efficiency upgrade, like improving the substation and stuff like that. So there is a lot of power around. We do have the capacity. You'll hear a lot of doom and gloom in the media about that, but we do in fact have the capacity to do this. Encourage you to get your news directly from BC Hydro and not from Facebook on that issue, because it is misleading. So that brings us then to the zero carbon step code, which is of course pushing us more towards electrification than the energy step code would. The original timeline published for this one was this. Now I got to modify that a little bit because that didn't happen. But we're supposed to have been at the low carbon by 2027. Very, very unlikely that we're going to do that. But we are currently at measure only for what that's worth. There may be, if I'm reading tea leaves, maybe the option to go to medium sometime soon, but probably getting to 2030, the zero it seems less and less likely as time goes on here, but maybe soon thereafter, if I'm being optimistic on it. So the headline on this one, again, from this brochure, which I think gets people a little uptight about this one because it is a little bit misleading from the brochure, I think, is that, the medium is going to decarbonize the heating system, the low is going to decarbonize the heating system and the hot water, and the zero carbon is going to decarbonize all the systems. And what they mean by all the systems is basically almost none of them. So that, I think, is what people get a little excited about, and like, you're going to take my gas cooking from my cold dead hand sort of thing is usually what we get there. But fear not, because we really need to look at the details here, and we need to look at what is included and what is not. Because there are a few different options for us here, much like energy step code, there are a few different options for us to go here. So when we're looking at what is included in the zero carbon step code, principal heating system is included. So that, if you're running a heat pump, that's a very low carbon thing. Supplementary heating systems are sort of included. So this is where you might have that gas supplementary system, the dual energy system. And I say sort of because my energy model is going to go and use the heat pump until the heat pump runs out of capacity. And then only then is it going to turn on the gas supplementary system. And even if you're in the far north, that's not going to be very often. So the supplementary systems are counted, but it's not a lot of usage. Hot water tanks are counted, and this is probably the biggest change that we're seeing here is that, there's sort of a move away from the gas boiler. But electric tanks are cheaper, so I'm not sure that's a big deal. Redundant and backup systems, not counted at all. Fireplaces, not counted at all. You can have a coal fire generator. I'm not going to count that. Probably not a great idea. Don't do that. But you can theoretically on this code, you could do that. So you can have your wood fireplace. Nobody's counting that at all. It's not included. System or equipment and appliances. This one is again it is only counted in the prescriptive option, which nobody in their right mind would use. So cooking and laundry are counted under the prescriptive option. They are not counted under any of the modeled options. And even if they were, they'd be such a tiny fraction of energy use that it doesn't matter. So that then brings me to this house here, and I'd love you all to sort of guess at what EL level or you think this house is. EL4 being the top, that's the zero carbon, the best you can do, with EL1 being like the worst, the biggest polluter. Pretty average house in BC here. Obviously, a few palm trees here, so they're heating the outside as well. And landing their helicopter in the pool. I don't know why, but this house here has a heat pump for the main heating system. So we're starting off pretty good, pretty low carbon there. Supplementary gas heating system. Maybe they're in the north where that sort of thing might be practical. A hot water tank, electric tank, starting off pretty good. Again, not too bad. But then we got some redundant systems here. We got a diesel generator because who wants to miss the game, right? We got to have that. Gas-fired fireplace in every room, including the walk-in closet, which I have seen in real life. That is a real thing, and because only a peasant would change in a room without a closet fire. Come on. We got a gas-heated radiant floor. Got to have that. We've got gas cooking, gas laundry, because the chef, professional chef, of course. Other gas usage in this house, we've got gas heated driveway, barbecue, heated pool, hot tub, patio heaters, got to have those, heated garage, greenhouse, and a gas fire pit, of course. Just the basics, right? Pretty simple house. Now, there's sort of two schools of thought in this now about the carbon step code. There's those that are sort of maybe more on the environmental side of things, saying this code isn't strong enough, which there's probably an argument for that, I think. But fear not, the biggest categories are taken care of, as we just reviewed. And for those of you that don't want to fight with your client about how they cook, this is an EL4 house. This is the best you can do according to this code. And it's because we're not counting all of these fairly major gas uses and stuff. So, those two schools of thought, I don't want to fight with my client about how they cook their food. That's a fairly common thing amongst builders and building industry. You're okay. Those on the environmental side of things thinking we need to clamp things down again. There's a fairly significant tipping point here, and taking care of the two biggest loads, that's the hot water and the heating, is a massive, massive difference from where we were before. And that gets us started on the path. And I would suggest that we don't want to let the perfect get in the way of the good enough, or at least getting started. And we got to start somewhere. Yeah. That brings me then to my last slide here, which is the carbon emissions of a cheeseburger. And I've now forgotten where I got this slide from. I think it was some university professor. But the final point I want to make here is similar to, those sort of like big items, small items sort of thing, is that small changes make huge differences. And sometimes we need to take baby steps, and that's okay. So if we look at the carbon emissions of a cheeseburger, right, there's the beef patty, by far the biggest chunk. Now, I grew up on a beef farm. I like a beef patty from time to time, but so I'm going to ignore the biggest chunk of the pie there. But if we go and look at how we're cooking this cheeseburger, 16 minutes on a gas grill, if we change that to an induction grill, we can drop a significant amount of emissions out of this cheeseburger. In fact, it's about 5% of the total. And so just by changing something that the eater of this cheeseburger is never going to notice, we can save about 5%. And I think that's really a useful strategy and a useful understanding for us in building code, is that if we can change things that our clients don't notice, for example, most clients don't care where their hot water comes from as long as it's hot. Most clients don't care where their heat comes from as long as the house is comfortable. And those are things we can tackle relatively easily, relatively cost effectively, without making really dramatic impact on their day-to-day life. And then I think would help us be more successful. All right, that was a mega speed run, and I think we did make it just about right on time. We're 8:41, so I think we've got a few Q&A if any came up from that, and my sort of blurrying pace on that. Otherwise, I think we're ready to move on, Jenna. I think, hey, if we didn't,
Well,
maybe
give folks some time to put questions in the chat. I know that this is kind of a format that not everyone's familiar with. So I will just say at the bottom of your screen, there's that black toolbar and there should be a little Q&A button you can press and it'll open up the Q&A box for you. If you don't see it there, there's also a more option with those 3 dots and the Q&A should be right in there. Alternatively, if you can't figure it out, just send me a message through the chat and I'll see it that way. But we did have a question come through the chat, Mark. It was, have you ever tried or considered SIP panels?
SIP panels. Yeah. Those are structurally insulated panels for those that aren't up on the lingo there. Now you can sound cool at parties. So structurally insulated panels are usually how they show up is they have some sort of like sheet plywood or OSB on the outside and the inside, and then there's some sort of dense foam on the interior. Actually, in fact, we've got about 4 projects in our portfolio that are under construction right now, maybe even more of that. Mostly in the Kootenays right now, it seems like that's a good place for SIP panels these days. They work and some people seem to like them. They do have a high R value. And I think the main pieces of why I think a SIP panel works is there's a few principles there. Like, first of all, it's prefabrication. And I do think prefabrication is at least the near future, if not the now future. So making that building go up faster and sort of things like that. I also like the thermal bridge free nature of a SIP panel. The house in the picture that we've got up on the screen right now is insulated with cellulose. So if I have the choice, my one critique of a SIP panel is the foam. And if I can get away from foam in any way I can, I will. And it's typically higher embodied carbon, that sort of thing. Now, it's not terrible. Like, relative to concrete, it's way better. And relative to, in fact, a lot of options, it's way better. I don't want to say it's like, oh, it's so terrible, don't use foam. We do use foam. But if I had the choice and I could get a prefabricated panel with cellulose in it versus a prefabricated panel with foam in it, I'm going to choose the cellulose one, assuming they're within a reasonable price of each other and my client can afford it. But all good options for sure. And we do see a lot of good step 5 houses using SIP, very airtight as well, because there's very few seams.
Okay, great. Okay, so that we've had a few follow-up questions there, and specific towards its ability to get towards ACH, lower ACH. It sounds like it can.
Anytime you can have less seams, you're better off for sure.
Perfect. Any kind of insight into the value compared to having rigid insulation on the outside?
Yeah. My opinion on wall is that there is no best wall, right? There is the best wall for your project, for your crew in that location. And the best wall will change depending on what your priorities are, right? So if my version of best is I need to build the cheapest wall I can possibly build because I'm trying to create a house for 10 families here, that may change your understanding of what the best wall is, versus I live in a fire zone and I don't want this thing to burn down. So now exterior insulation, rock wool particular, becomes the price maybe doesn't matter as much anymore. So, my next house will have exterior insulation on it because it is in a fire zone. My current house does not because it's in the city. It is a double stud wall. So I think it's not like what you have to do every time. It's about what's right for the location, what's right for the priorities of the client, and what's right for your crew. If my crew doesn't have the skills to put on exterior insulation, that may change the math.
Right. No one size fits all solution.
Yeah, there is no one size fits all. It's about understanding the base principles of why we're doing what we're doing.
Great. Thanks, Mark. And Shay, one of our panelists, added some insights into the chat there too. I had a question, Mark. I know you mentioned that different jurisdictions vary in terms of what energy step code and zero carbon step code they're implementing. How can folks find out that information for?
Well, as it happens, the CEA has a very handy dandy little, database, which I would recommend for any professionals working in the field of performance, where you might need to look this up fairly frequently across a broad range of municipalities. Generally, and I know there's a number of municipal officials on the call today. Generally, if I can Google it and I can say like, Saanich energy step code, and it will come up, that page will come up, and I know I can with Saanich, and it will say, we are at this level, we are going to this level on this estate, and you're required to submit this, this, and this. That's sort of best case scenario for the municipalities, is that they have that on their website, very clear terms, kind of ready to go. That's for the sort of the average builder. That's generally where we're going to find it, is on the municipal website.
Great. And I swear I wasn't looking for a plug for our dashboard. Thanks. Thanks. I did add the link in the chat there if folks are interested. And you can connect with us at CEA if you have any questions on how to navigate that. Okay, we just had a question come through the Q&A asking for some tips in decision making versus cost for decarbonizing a 1977 2x4 construction energy audit pour.
So this sounds like a
retrofit scenario, maybe?
Yeah, should I retrofit sort of scenario? So I'm probably the wrong person to ask about retrofits, if I'm being honest, because I'm a big fan of bulldozers, and that gets me in trouble a lot with a lot of people. And I'm interested in what the panelists think about this. You guys might be more keen on retrofits. So our team did it's on one of our websites, actually on the heat.ca website. We did a bunch of sort of research and carbon calculations and various energy calculations on a number of different houses around the city of Victoria. And some of them were historic houses. And what we were trying to figure out is, what is the best option for this house? Do we deep energy retrofit it, or do we rip it down and build a sixplex? And a high performance sixplex at that. And so, what is the highest best use of the land kind of question? That's what we were trying to answer. And it was a bit of a interesting exercise, very annoying for people who like thick walls and things like that. When we start counting carbon, is sometimes the thickest wall is not the best wall. What we found, though, is that in every case of these historic houses, environmentally, cost-wise, and in terms of number of people we could get into houses, it was always better to rip it down and build something higher density, higher performance, higher density. Now that, may change a little bit if you've got a properly historic house that has some sort of significance. And in Victoria, we have a few of those. But there's always the question of whose history are you preserving, right? Because there's a lot, it tends to be very colonial history kind of things, and so there's a lot of debate to be had there as to what's the highest best use of the land. But I think what's important, to answer that question in a very roundabout way, what's important is we do the math, and your energy advisor can do that math, or should be able to do that math. They should be able to do that for you and help you understand what is the best option for your place here. And if it is a retrofit and the math comes out great on the retrofit, then great, then it's worth doing. And they should be able to steer you in a way that makes sense, sort of best bang for your buck sort of thing, save the most energy for what your priorities are.
Great. Thanks, Mark.
Shay's got a response to that. I think he wants to debate my bulldozer comment, probably, hopefully.
Well, we don't all live in markets where pushing something over and building something new is economically feasible. The unfortunate truth about retrofits is that they can be really costly to do, even if you're not going to push it over, especially if you're going to take the envelope first approach. Upgrading your envelope on an already existing home can be really costly because it's not easy to access those parts of the house to upgrade them. So in a 1977 2x4 house, I might look at the attic insulation is usually fairly accessible. And in a lot of 1977 houses, it's not great. So a top up in the attic is really affordable, and can often, help somewhat. And then windows in and of themselves can be a feasible upgrade that can make a big difference. But also just check your air tightness and see if you can do a couple of little fixes up around the house, to kind of drop that air exchange down a bit. But envelope upgrades are expensive. You have to remove siding often. I will say that if you're going to upgrade your windows or If you're going to redo your siding anyway, that's the time to look at adding some extra insulation, because you're already taking that step backwards. So you can kind of make some upgrades efficient by doing them in tandem with other aesthetics things you might be thinking about.
I think that's a really good point. Is if it's broken already, like your windows are failing or on their way out, you've got to replace them anyways. You might as well put something good in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that no one solution fits all comes back again.
Yeah.
And also, I know you had mentioned embodied carbon there at one point. So if that's a consideration of yours as well, for folks on the call, knocking down and rebuilding might not be the best approach there either.
Yeah.
So depends on your priorities and motivations and abilities, opportunities. All right. I had one more question I'll ask and give folks some more time to kind of pop their questions in the Q&A if they have any. You had mentioned this, but I think that there's value in revisiting it, just kind of the role of energy advisors and modeling tools. I know I put a question down about the heat software that I saw pop up, and then remembered how much awareness you have of this software being pretty close to your heart. So maybe just reiterating the role of modeling tools and energy advisors kind of in supporting folks meeting these steps.
Yeah, and I think Angel made a good point in the chat there that not all energy advisors work in retrofits, and so we sort of have our specialties. I think it's one of those things that, like, we'll probably talk about it later too, but really pulling in these sort of early professionals in getting this advice early allows you to make changes that are substantial and cost effective. And the way our team does that is by using high-tech modeling software. And the model itself is, it's been around for a long time, and that's not necessarily high-tech. The math behind it is fairly simple. In fact, it was designed in the 80s when computers were the size of a room, and it still works the same way. But luckily, physics didn't change in that time. And it's not perfect, but it gives us, it gives us enough of a direction. That's really what it's for, is to give us a direction. It may not be able to say your energy bill is going to be $4.52, but it can give you a direction to reduce that bill in a reasonable way. And what we've done, our team a couple of years ago, almost like 6-7 years ago now, got tired of doing all that sort of stuff manually, and so we built a piece of software that wraps around that energy model, and that's the heat software. It's at heat.ca, and it's available for energy advisors to use. And that's where all those graphs comes from. So what it is it's a visual display of what's going on in the energy model, in addition to the ability to run parametric runs. So we can run 10,000 different options on a house and look at all the options instead of just looking at one or two, and then sort of weigh them out based on what is going to be the most cost-effective option for that. And so it's designed for you to sort of sit there in an integrated design meeting with your energy advisor and go through all the options and filter it based on what your crew knows how to do, what your client wants, and what you can afford versus what's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck on a project. And that's how we're getting houses to step 5 often cheaper than getting them to step 3. And if we're doing it earlier in design, then we can do it. We can do that sort of thing. If we're doing it late in design and we're just trying to shoehorn a house into some step that it doesn't want to go into, then that's when we start getting more expensive.
All right. I feel like that's a good segue into the entire discussion we're about to have with our panelists. Folks, I did put some resources in the chat. If this is still so very new to you and this presentation was kind of above where you're at in terms of understanding the code, there are some tools from the province of BC. So scroll up to those that were shared. And yes, okay, great. So it is time for our panel discussion. We have a great... Oh, sorry, Clayton, that is not your photo.
Yeah, I was just noticing that. I was like,
I was like, there's a panelist I'm unfamiliar with. All right, we're just going to take this slide down and we'll see the panel.
That's Jamie Kuhn of Pheasant Hill.
That's okay. I'll close with some appreciation to our funders there, Mark. But we'll just stop sharing the screen there and we'll actually get our panelist faces on your screen. So we have a correct representation of who's here today, and we'll just spotlight the panelists so that they're front and center for you folks. So really excited to have a great group of panelists here. I'll introduce or let the panelists introduce themselves. Sorry, just scrolling down to our panel questions here. Sorry, just one moment here. Perfect. So yeah, we're going to do a quick round of introductions from our panelists. Mariah will be spotlighting us while we're doing this, and we're going to start with an introduction from each panelist. So your name, your role, the region that you work within, and the types of projects that you typically work on. So you've all met Mark. Maybe Mark, you can give a quick reminder of folks of those, and then we'll move around to the other panelists.
Sure. I'm just here to cause trouble. That's who I am. Yeah. Mostly our team operates as an energy consultant these days, and we cover everything south of Prince George. That's what the most of our team is doing. We do also run a development company, which is currently building a high-performance affordable housing in northern Nova Scotia.
Great, thank you. And Clayton, how are you? Everyone, this is the real.
I'm the real Clayton Parks. Yeah, we're an Okanagan-based mechanical company known as Quality Air Care. We handle anything from Soyuz up towards the North Okanagan, going towards Salmon Arm, and everything from Merritt over to Big Way. Company specializes in doing high-performance mechanical systems, plumbing and heating for residential, new construction, retrofits, and we also do commercial. Our company has also been hyper-focused on doing destination homes and trying to build affordable destination homes, such as what happens in Big Way, the Solar Star.
Perfect. Thanks, Clayton. And Shay, how about you?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Shay Bulmer. I'm the owner and GM of Northern Homecraft Limited. We're based in Vanderhoof, the geographical center of BC. It's okay if you don't know where it is or you haven't heard of it. We service all of Northern BC, building custom net zero homes and doing larger scale renovations. We're a design build company that really likes to get involved with a project from the moment someone thinks about it. We like to facilitate integrated design processes and make sure we're hitting those targets right from the get-go. That's our jam. That's what we like to do.
Wonderful. And Angel.
I'm Angel Heinrich, so Angel's Drafting and Design. I'm a designer and energy advisor in Fort St. John. Like Shay, small community, so we service the entire northern BC, pretty much Quesnel North, and from the border to the coast. It's cold where we live, so things are done a little differently than in Mark's neck of the woods.
Our daffodils are almost finished, I feel the need to tell you.
Oh, it's not snowing?
It was cold, but yeah, we're in tulip season now.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll have to schedule another trip and it can snow for you again.
All right. So as everyone on the call is aware, we live in a big province with multiple different climate zones and different kind of realities for folks to build in. So we've tried to kind of have a bit of representation across the province here so that we have, just different regional representation talking about their challenges and solutions that work in their climate realities. So just a reminder for panelists and everyone on the call, we're going to be doing a panel discussion led and facilitated by myself for the next 45 minutes or so, and then we'll have another 15 minutes again for questions from folks on the call. So you can go ahead and add your questions in the Q&A function or the chat if you're unable to find that. We'll make sure that there's plenty of time for your specific questions on the call. You'll also notice in about 45 minutes, a little poll will come up. You'll just see it in front of your screen, and that's our feedback poll. So just taking a couple minutes there is really helpful for us. All right, so let's move into these questions then. So taking advantage kind of such very geographic representation, let's start with what you're each kind of seeing on the ground in your regions. So thinking about the regions you work in, what are the most common challenges you're seeing when trying to meet higher energy step code or zero carbon step code targets, and how are you and your team approaching these challenges? So maybe I'll go in reverse order of how we just heard from folks, and I'll start with Angel.
So my region has been a little bit slower to absorb everything. There's really no one trying to achieve those step 5 houses. We have builders that are accidentally hitting step 4, and it speaks to what Mark was talking about, where it's just orientation, number of windows, those kinds of things, and how well the team did the envelope so that it pushes that airtightness to really great numbers. With that said, my region excels at airtightness. Mark loves it when I text him and say, mid-construction 0.6 ACH, because his builders struggle with that more. And I do firmly believe that it's just due to it's so cold where we live. Our builders have figured out we do not want to call that someone is saying it's cold in our house. So really just been reinforcing that success with the airtightness and getting those metrics down and starting to focus on how do we consistently achieve step 4 rather than by accident. So slow moving, but learning along together.
Okay, great. So it sounds like folks are achieving higher steps maybe without even realizing it. And that ability is there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, great. Shay, how about over in your neck of the woods?
We kind of have faced and do face all the challenges that you might think of when it comes to higher performing homes. The climate is one for sure. We build in both climate zone 6 and zone 7A, servicing Prince George's climate zone 6, and where we build out in Vanderhoof, Fort St. James, Fraser Lake is zone 7A. So there is that challenge to kind of answer that riddle, and what sort of features we have to put into a home to get it up to those points. But believe it or not, those riddles are very solvable, and we haven't really run into anything that stops us from reaching step code level 5 in those zones. One of the other big factors that we run up against in the beginning anyway was the market value of homes up here doesn't support new construction, let alone higher performance new construction. So that's something that is very set in the minds of folks in our region. And so it's something that we kind of need to educate our clients through, because the incremental costs to achieve the higher steps are not that great, and or don't have to be that great. And I think Mark touched on this in his presentation, that with some diligent and thoughtful planning, you can mitigate a ton of those costs right out of the gate and hit those higher steps. It's very achievable. So kind of all of them, but through the various ones that we've done over the years, we've managed to solve those riddles and come up with a formula that works really well up here, and allows us to build higher performing homes within a modest budget. And so that's something that we're proud of up here for sure.
Great. And maybe we'll dive into that cost conversation again. I know that's on a lot of people's minds. But Clayton, I'll move to you.
Yeah, so I mean, fortunately, where we are in Kelowna, we have always had like a heating inspection. So a lot of our contractor base that resides here, works out here, they're used to conforming to a lot of the things that have been changing, which has been adding IDPs and then changing equipment to match what all these things are. So like as we got to increase the step code, all these types of equipment, they became higher efficient, and the off-the-shelf style builders all had to stop going away. It was just unfortunate for them is that they were adopting things coming up, and a lot of the strain got put onto all of our contractors who are actually educated doing the work. So, I mean, the biggest thing for us is getting education out towards everybody and people uptaking that education that is actually put forward towards them.
And that's education for the building industry? So. Sorry, Clayton.
Oh, go ahead again.
That was education for the building industry that you're saying?
Building industry, and then for mechanical contractors.
Okay. Great. And Mark, I know you talked about some challenges in your presentation, but anything to add?
Yeah, I've got all sorts of opinions. I mean, I think we've clearly shown that it's possible, and that with the right amount of planning, that it is actually quite easy to do. And those pictures I showed in the presentation, I think, are good examples of that. We have I would say our biggest challenge here in the Greater Victoria area is design. There's sort of a look that people are at least maybe not even people, but designers tend to stick to, and it's very lumpy. It's very articulated. Some of the municipalities sort of somewhat call for it in their design guidelines. And that is probably our biggest challenge, followed very closely by the ability to get run out of town and still work. here. So there are trades that really probably ought not to be working anymore. But in Victoria, you can start in Victoria, get run out of town there, go to Langford, get run out of town there, and go to Souk. And so and then you can repeat the process because everybody's forgotten about you 10 years later. And so it's a lot different than I think, well, I would hope with, like if Angel does that, then it's, there's nowhere to go, right? You're you're done
banging
as a
on Mark's
business.
door.
Exactly. So, so that's definitely a problem. And we see that in some areas where we're still coming across builders and trades that are just like, how do you still have a job? This is so bad. And doesn't make any sense that they're still in business.
Some of the other challenges, to continue with Mark's conversation as well, is designers that are not upgrading their education because there's no licensing or governing body for us. And so they're making assumptions on what is required for a house to meet just basic step 3, and then convincing their client of such. So an example of that was a set of plans came across my desk for EA work, and the designer insisted that the homeowner needed to put 2 inches of rigid insulation on the inside of all the envelope walls. Absolutely not necessary for step code. And B, how are you finishing this home? What are you attaching your receptacle outlets to, your curtain rods, your hanging your pictures on styrofoam, things like that, now the EA is left to undo someone's education. And so right out of the gate, it's a negative interaction. And so that client or homeowner is going to look at you and go like, I don't want to do this. This lady just told me everything I did is wrong. And so it's not always the most comfortable in that regard. So that's a challenge we run into as well. It's the lack of education, not just in the mechanical people or energy advisors, it's across all trades.
And I assume a little bit of more education kind of in the homeowner realm would be helpful.
Yes. But it's like anything else. I mean, to what Clayton spoke of before, we have lots of education available, but you can only, put the bowl of water out. The horse has to get there on its own.
Right. I want to look back, Mark, you were talking about some challenges being just the design, the house design that clients want, not really like creating some difficulty in reaching higher steps. And so are there ways other people are seeing like client preferences for their design and build, kind of reducing the ability to reach higher steps?
Yeah. Shay's probably got an opinion on this one, but I would preface that a little bit. If it's not necessarily what clients want, but it's what's being delivered. And so there's a certain look that's currently being delivered, particularly in Vancouver and Vancouver Island regions. And I think actually Kelowna is probably another one where that sort of, you've got the hillside look, right? That beach look. And, that the performance of that particular type of look is not high. But if we go back even 50 years ago to a 1950s split level, that is actually a relatively high performance design. If we go back even further, 100 years ago to what we see, in the older parts of Canada, a square box with windows, a few windows around each side, not no windows, still a fair number of windows there. But those are, if we took those designs, that's an easy step 5 all day long.
Well, we definitely have it. I mean, everything that comes out of this community is going to be lake facing, it's going to be valley facing, it's going to be cantilever. Like there's so many different feats, changes, and things that the contractors have to accommodate to. Not only that, we're creating so many areas of exposure, right, which the heating and cooling systems have to adapt to. They continually get more and more difficult, and the client expectations get higher and higher at time.
I think that's why bringing your EA on board early in the whole process is really key. That's something that we're very committed to now. There's things you can do for the aesthetics of a home, even after you take the jogs out of the walls and whatnot. You can dress a house up with covered porches, dormers, nice timber work that all exists outside of the envelope. So you can still focus on that envelope first mentality, but then dress it up with certain aesthetic additions to the outside. And that we've had some success with that for sure. But again, like bringing everybody together early. In case you can't tell, I'm a big proponent for integrated design process. It's 100% what allows us to hit our targets when we are aiming for them. Bringing those people together early on, I like to try to bring everyone together at the concept stage of a plan. So first, we'll work with a client right out of the gate, and we'll work on things like functionality, massing, blocking out the home so that the floor plan works for them. And then we'll maybe aim for a basic assembly so that we can get a concept version of the plans out. But at that point, then it's bring everybody together. So, and the other thing too that's important about IDP is it's scalable. The way that it was first presented to me, I'll be honest with you, I rejected it. It was daunting and it seemed preposterous. I can't say that word today.
You're from Vanderhoof.
Astronomically expensive for the scale of the houses that some of the houses we build up here just wasn't practical. But you can scale IDP to the house. It doesn't have to be this huge, expensive process. If you have a fairly simple home, you can bring in a very good EA and a good mechanical. Someone like Clayton, they're going to be able to facilitate that need at the design stage. Get them together early so that you know what kind of adjustments you need to make to your structure or your assemblies and things like that. And then from there, you can take the plan to the next stage. And that's kind of where we're finding our success is by sort of bringing all those minds together early and knowing what the targets are before there's a ton of backtracking, even in the design.
I would echo that. I do the same thing if I'm wearing both hats, the designer and the EA hat. And I agree with Shay. That very first presentation we had on IDP was just overwhelming.
Yeah. Sounds like this huge thing. And
it really isn't. It's just
we were the same way as well. Like I've had IDP meetings at Tim Hortons with like 4 people, and I've had IDP meetings and board meetings that probably cost $10,000 a minute because there's so many engineers there and things. And for some projects that works. For our East Coast projects, which are affordable, high performance, like they're beyond what this code requires, and they're in a reasonably cold climate. There, we started 3 years before, and the way we chose trades was we didn't know anybody there, so we started calling people up and said, "Hey, are you willing to participate in this?" And the ones that said yes are the ones that got the job. And it was a design service agreement. They got paid. Everybody's getting paid, but the ones that are now currently building the building participated in that integrated design. And if you looked at the budget next to a regular building, you wouldn't know the difference. Our building has a tree in the middle and an atrium, and you wouldn't know the difference in that budget compared to the one down the street that does not have the tree and is not high performance.
Would agree to that, right? Having like a level playing field takes away all the assumptions for anybody who's looking at the project. Like you just have everything answered to give to your client and then to give to each one of your trades that are going to be involved with building this high performance home.
And
I would encourage, I think the landscape for especially custom home construction has changed a lot over the years. I think like where I'm going to go get a price from 3 contractors, and then I'm going to ask that contractor to get a price on the mechanical from 3 mechanical contractors. And that's an antiquated system. And I think you should commit to good subtrades early and right away. And that's the first investment that you're going to make in your home is before the shovel ever goes in the ground. But if you're committing to good subtrades and a good general contractor, and you're committed to the design process, that investment is going to come back in spades during construction. By the time that whole team goes to build that house, they've done it in their mind 4 times already. And that makes things on site incredibly efficient. It mitigates the chances for backtracking. One backtrack, relative to, let's say, windows or mechanical, that could be tens of thousands of dollars. And so make that investment early, commit to good people, and then you just take the reins off your build. It makes it efficient and economical.
Great. And folks on the call, there are a whole lot of resources out there around IDP if you are wanting to learn more about this process. And we'll make sure we'll do a little bit of a dive and share some of those resources in the follow-up email. So keep your eye there. I want to kind of build out on this design piece, the design phase where we know like a lot of these key decisions are made and where some of the biggest gaps can emerge in terms of our ability to reach higher steps. So I'll ask this question specifically of Mark and Angela, and then ask Shay and Clayton to jump in too with their perspectives. But just wondering where you're actually seeing the biggest disconnect in that design phase between design intent, energy, modeling assumptions, and what actually gets built, and some practical ways teams can actually work to reduce those gaps.
Probably the biggest problem is that there is no team. I get a call from a homeowner that wants to build, and they just want a set of plans, and then they get told, well, you need this, this, and this. And so it's just like, okay, well, who's going to do that? And just check the box. And no conversation about, like, let's meet together and figure out how this process is going to go. And so I imagine from someone who's not in industry, it's probably a very confusing process. And also because they're getting information from multiple sources that is not necessarily all the same, that just increases the confusion. And who do they believe? And, this person costs more, but she does both things. And, is it better for me or is it not better for me? And those kinds of things. So at that stage, there's an issue. The other issue is sheet 2 that Mark had from the compliance report. I like to call that the recipe. Mm-hmm. And that recipe is how you bake your cake, or in this case, how you build your house. And it's that compliance document by many people is just viewed as, I just need this piece of paper for the building inspector. Okay, I got it. Here you go. Let's not look at it. That box is checked on my permit application. What people don't realize, and I do put it in an email when I send the report, is, if anything is going to change from this sheet, please contact me prior to making the changes or prior to purchasing equipment. Sometimes it happens. The HRV or something that was originally spec'd is no longer available. So now we need to find an alternative. Great, let's have a conversation and make sure that what you're purchasing is going to still meet that requirement. Or those decisions are sometimes being made based on cost and how influential the salesperson is. That is right there, front and center, in the middle of the build. Fortunately, I had a building inspector catch a change in insulation. A homeowner was convinced by a salesperson that spray foaming the entire house rather than doing an attic, traditional with blow-in, would be cheaper. And so the building inspector showed up for poly inspection and looked at the recipe sheet, called me and said, "Did you know about this?" I was out of town. Fortunately, the building inspector took down all the information that I needed so that I could rerun the model at the client's cost. And so it might have been cheaper today, whether it's going to be cheaper down the road, to be determined.
Yeah. I suspect not cheaper is my suspect.
Yeah. Right.
And we run into that as well. Like I like that term, the recipe, right? You got to follow that recipe, and that is so expensive when builders don't, and or clients, like you say, find fancy salesmen and then kind of go off the rails. That early, I think we've said it so many times, and I think it's probably going to be the theme of the thing, is that early design, having everybody on board and understanding why. And I really like when a client attends an integrated design. We've had a few of them where the client is there and they're sort of a little bit cross-eyed in terms of like trying to follow the conversation and everything. But what they can tell is that the people in the room understand what they're talking about. And so I've had a few clients leave those design meetings and say, I had no idea what any of you said, but it sounded like you knew what you were doing when you said it. And so now all of a sudden we've built that trust, right? And for home builders and such, the biggest asset we have is trust. Like our tools and our trucks aren't really worth anything. The trust is what's worth something. And so if we don't do a good job of building that trust early on, we're hooped for the project. And part of that trust is that design and really understanding what the client wants and needs, and then guiding them to a solution that fits. And in doing so, we can guide them to a solution that also fits within the performance, and helping them understand, what that performance means, And that Pinterest picture you just pulled off may not be entirely practical, for this, and here's why. And a lot of that we see, particularly with ocean views here. People want a wall of glass to the ocean. There is a lot of reasons why a wall of glass to the ocean is not a good idea. It's not fun to live with. It's very uncomfortable. It's not just about the energy. It's about, this is not you're going to be paying for this for the rest of your life if you live in this house. We've had houses that are unlivable because they have glass facing the ocean in some cases. And it's not to say don't do any glass facing the ocean. That's why we bought the property, but it does not have to be that wall of glass that really only looks good in magazines but is not good to live with.
Yeah, one of the underlying things that is not discussed so much is that occupant comfort.
Mm-hmm.
If you have that wall of glass facing the ocean, you want your chair to be up against that glass. You don't want to be sitting 10 feet away from it because it's uncomfortable to be up against that glass.
Yeah. And we do. That's actually a really good point that we maybe should discuss as well, is because, nobody cares about the environment when it comes to spending money, it seems. At least that's what people seem to be proving over and over again with where they spend their money. Like, nobody's willing to spend money on saving polar bears. So we have to come at it from a different angle. The results are the same, but if we come at it from a different angle, and particularly for those folks around that don't understand or the root causes of climate change and that it's human caused and a real thing, we can still communicate with those people if we don't come at it from the environmental side, and we don't need to. We can come at it from the comfort side. We can come at it from, which is huge. Like, everybody goes out and buys a more comfortable pillow and more comfortable shoes. Like, that's a very normal thing to do, and people are willing to spend a lot of money on it. People are also willing to spend, people are also willing to spend a lot of money on their health. So talking about clean air and things like that. And people are also willing to spend a little bit of money, not a ton, on resilience. So, not having the house get cold in the power outage and stuff like that. So those are sort of the angles that we tend to have more success with in sort of communicating with the client than in that integrated design, in that early setup when we can do it, than talking about how we're going to save bunny rabbits and make the trees grow with this house.
Investment retention has been a huge sales factor for us with the higher performing homes. Yeah. So just in that, your home is going to perform to future codes and performance standards, whether it's mandated by the government or not. The progression of things is that we improve things over time. That's human nature. It's how we are. The investment that you're making in your home now to build it to a higher standard is going to allow that to carry on into future markets. And that has been a really big part of what makes these houses appealing to our clients. I'd say of the ones we've built, of the like step 5 net zero or net zero ready homes we've built, I'd say 60 to 75, maybe 3/4 of them were actually decided, the client decided to go that route because they felt more secure about the investment that they were making and how it was going to stack up down the road. So, there's no shame in talking about, how your money is going to mature in your home if you build to a higher performance.
We've now got some data on this. As a sixplex we built now almost 8 years ago has had a few resellings, and it's a passive house, almost net zero, not quite, not enough room on the roof. But the units in there, if we exclude the market inflations and things that have happened in Victoria, those units are selling on average for between 20 and 40,000 above market value as a resale product. So, that it shows. And I mean, these were not expensive units to begin with. I think that we sold them originally for like 400,000. So that's a big percentage of the original price increase there. Just that retained value of having a high performance house. So,
I mean, multiple wins stacked up is great, right?
Yeah.
In the environmental aspect is a win. Having your investment be future-proofed, that's a win. Being more healthy in your house, that's a win. When you can stack those up and illustrate them well for a client, these houses are really appealing in any market.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Some great perspectives. I just want to zoom out a bit away from drawings and models into what's actually kind of happening on site and where those details are coming together or not. And so just jumping into maybe some few specific construction challenges and mechanical installation from a mechanical installation standpoint as well. So for Clayton and Shay, where do projects typically fall short when aiming for higher performance, and what can be done earlier in the process to prevent those issues? I know we talked about the importance of IDP and involving an energy advisor. So if those are the key steps, or maybe other considerations early in the process too.
Well, I actually would speak a lot to what Shay was saying there with investing in the right contractors at the get-go. When you have long-term loyal clientele that works with you all the time, those people know each other in and out. They know how things operate. They know the expectations of what the builder is looking for, and they perform in such an efficient manner on the site. Like, it prevents having extra holes being drilled throughout the house. There's considerations for aesthetics, for drops. Like, there's just so much importance on investing into the right type of people building that house every time. So I still go back to saying education is a key concept, and that education starts with having people who are working in coordination with each other all the time.
I agree with that 100%. I think part of the success that we've managed in executing the build has come from getting buy-in from our sub-trades. Pardon me. That was a difficulty in the beginning. When you're talking about extra work, when they can go to the house next door and install the wiring or install the mechanical system for a contractor that doesn't care about their envelope. And you're asking them, well, you got to caulk every wire you poke through the vapor box. And, there's all these extra details that we do. We need you to communicate with us while we're doing it so that we can put an EPDM rubber gasket on the wall before you poke your line set out. Like, things like that. There's a few extras, right? But if you can get buy-in from your sub-trades and have them share the victory, it really helps. So we, a few houses ago, with our trusted group, we had like a mid-construction blower door pizza day. And we just invited everybody that had a hand in that house to come for the mid-construction blower door day. And while, we were pressurizing and depressurizing the house and looking at it with a FLIR and a smoke pencil and doing all that stuff, we were just eating pizza and kind of sharing that experience all together. And then when it comes back good, everyone's happy and it's a victory for everybody. And the sub-trades are proud of it too, because they took the time to work with you on it. So, one simple event like that and, a few large pizzas, and you can really make a huge difference for your buy-in. I think a really important point to make is that you can hit these levels and you can detail these builds with the materials that you're already using. So, and we found this up here, it's a bit of a supply chain to get stuff up where we are sometimes. And so a lot of the specialty materials might not be readily available in the stores. And yet we've had success with our builds just by thoughtfully looking at how to put those materials together. And this is not big. These are not big changes. It's just thinking about, where does your building wrap terminate at the bottom? Are you sealing that to your damp proofing on the foundation? How are you taking care of that seam? It's not a big deal to take care of that seam. We've started using on every build, rubber EPDM gaskets, and you can order that stuff off Amazon. You can get a sheet of it. That's enough to do 2 houses. There it is. That's exactly it. It shows up straight to your door in 2 days and you're ready to go. And those details aren't tough to do. They're actually, I would almost argue that they're easier to get that seal around a hose bib or a line set coming out, just because you don't have to caulk it after. You're going to take that gasket, and we got a leather punch. Also, we ordered that on Amazon. And we just punched the hole smaller than the pipe, and it's airtight when your sub-trade pokes it through. So there's quite simple things you can do with materials that are very readily available or that you're already using. If you haven't tested one of your houses yet, I'd suspect you're probably doing better than you think you are. That might be something that you find, and if just give it a shot. You don't have to do the IDP thing right out of the gate right away, but hire the EA and test a house, because if you give a crap at all about how you're putting things together, you're probably doing better than you think.
Clayton, are you seeing those gaskets in your practice as well?
Yep. Yeah, day to day. I mean, my company actually uses the same something like that already for penetrations. Also, the backing that goes within inside the house as well is something that everybody again has to be in tune with. And going back to like picking your trades there, good work isn't cheap, and cheap work isn't always good. Like having somebody who knows and has this knowledge to do it and goes there and does preemptive work with backing changes so much for that house in the end on air changes.
And that EPDM is relatively easy to work with. I was recently on a site for mid-construction and the siders were there. And so they were dealing with the electrician's penetration. So there was a wire poking out. The hole was significantly larger than the wire. So you've got this round hole with this thing that's figure 8 shaped, and it was just gobbed with some kind of caulking. I don't know exactly what material it was. And I just casually brushed up against the wire and it removed all the caulking because it was cold and the caulking hadn't set. And so it was a very good visual. I kind of upset a few people probably that day because all the subs were standing there while I did this. But it was a very effective visual as to, you know, this wire's gone through there, it's caulked, but down the road, the electrician's going to come and he's going to yank on that wire before Angel comes and does her occupancy test. So exactly what they just witnessed would be a problem down the road. And so it was remediated, I think probably before I left the site because nobody wanted to be responsible for that.
Shay, you touched on something that I think is really important and we make sure is part of this conversation is that mid-construction blower door test. Maybe just elaborating on how you think that this can, how projects can benefit from this test.
Yeah, it's integral to our whole process. So we don't build a house, a high performance home without doing a mid-construction blower door test. We never get complacent with our ability to make it airtight and think, we're good. We don't need to do it on this one. We do it on all of them. And it's a great exercise. Basically, we load somebody up with everything they might need to take care of a problem that we might find. So, we stock their pouch with different types of tape, a couple of tubes of caulking, maybe some spray foam in a can, things like that, Acoustiseal, and we just make them follow our EA around. And then we check some of the notorious problem spots, around your windows, chimneys on fireplaces, wood stoves, those are tough, but we have methods for that too. We use high temp caulking and we turn the box that goes through the envelope. We make that a part of the envelope. So, you can treat all these things, but it's a great opportunity to just follow your EA around and look at those things on the FLIR. And it's real satisfying when you see, like the black, they're like from a horror movie, like the black tentacles coming in of the cold air. And then you get to seal that off and it disappears. I don't know. It's fun. It feels good. But the whole process is a great opportunity to just make sure all those little perforations are addressed. And it doesn't take, if you're like, oh man, this sounds so labor intensive. This is 2 hours, 3 hours maybe, for a whole house. And that's if you find lots of issues to deal with. But we can do a mid-construction blower door and review each room of the house with a FLIR or a smoke pencil, or feather. I've seen Mark use feathers. And we can address those inside of a couple hours, really.
The key point with the mid-construction is having everybody from your team there. Have all of your subs present, not just the builder. Because though the builder is the one that is responsible at the end of the day for signing off, your job as a builder is going to be way easier if you have faith and you know that your sub-trades are dealing with those penetrations as you wish them to be, and that they are going to not be all leaky. There's Mark's feathers. And it just makes the job go so much smoother. And so then that also shortens your mid-construction every time. And now it becomes a challenge as a team to how do we improve next time? What are we going to do differently? And having those open conversations. And that's maybe where Shay's Pizza invites those conversations because people are sitting around. And so maybe that's what I need to do to get my sub-trades showing up, is making sure there's pizza on site. I don't know.
I was going to say, that's a great idea, Shay, with incorporating sub-trades to that.
I don't charge enough for that. I'm not builder quality, Shay.
Yeah, builder buys
it's important for sub-trades to see what actions and reactions happen to what they're doing on site.
And
predominantly is great.
Predominantly the subs are the ones that are creating the penetrations in the envelope. So they need to be aware of those impacts.
Yeah. I mean, like case in point, we had a blower door, our mid-construction blower door on our house that we're building right now was 2 weeks ago. And our insulator and vapor barrier subtrade couldn't make it that day. And I know it bugged him because the next day I got a text and it was like, how'd we do? Question mark. So, I mean, he didn't have to send that text. I mean, surely he would have heard from me if he needed to. But he was curious, right? And so it just kind of indicates that the buy-in is there. They want to know how we've done when they're a part of the victory. So share that with them. And the results you get are great.
We're doing a pizza lunch on Thursday.
Point seven, by the way.
Nice.
At mid construction on a house that was never designed to be, out of the gate anyway. We had to do a lot of massaging in the IDP to get that one to be step 5 net zero.
Yeah, we're doing pizza lunch on Thursday for a builder. Same thing as Shay's talking about there, and it's something we do relatively commonly. We don't buy the pizza, Angel. It's on the builder, so we don't have to worry about the budget.
Okay. All right.
But we also
pizza.
yeah. But yeah, it's interesting. This builder has done that before, and last time I think there was 20 people there, and it's a team building exercise, right? Yeah. With the trades, and it's not super expensive. We bring a little projector and we project the results up on a sheet of drywall. Like, this is not a fancy ordeal. Yeah, like we're sitting on boxes of drywall mud as our chairs and stuff. So this is, it's a pretty simple thing to do, and it's one of those things that's like the small, easy changes that make a huge impact over time. Yeah.
Any other kind of practical advice for those teams that are looking to improve outcomes, or those builders who are looking to improve outcomes for their next project who maybe haven't tried to build to higher steps before?
I would say mind your envelope while you're framing. Even you kind of want to be a couple steps ahead for sure, especially if you do have like a covered porch or somewhere where the envelope needs to run up behind a set of mono trusses or something like that. If you're doing an exterior air barrier, which we do on all our houses, we split the exterior, the air barrier and the vapor barrier. We don't just use the poly on the inside for both. We do seal both. That's just sort of our extra ace in the hole. And we are also thoughtful about our materials and what we use. If we're using a thick wall, we kind of build with 2 wall systems. We either do a split wall that lets us custom pick exactly what the R value is that we need, or we do a 2x6 at 24 OC with exterior insulation. Those are the ones we use. And just depending on the composition of the house or complexity, we will pick one. But we're very thoughtful about those materials. So if we're doing a thick wall, we will only ever use reactive vapor barrier on the inside. Either certainteed membrane or there's Myrex, Siga. It's expensive and hard to get, but it works well. We will always do a rain screen on a thick wall. So there's certain rules that we've created for ourselves to kind of stick within sound building science, and then achieve those goals. So I guess just be a step ahead in your mindset. There's things you're going to do in framing that are going to help your airtightness down the road. And then do think about the materials that you're using and how to apply them better at every stage.
Yeah, a common one that I see to further your example there, Shay, with the mono trusses, or you have a 2-story house and the garage roof butts into that 2nd-story wall, is that the framers have all done their job. It's great. The roofers come along and they zip their knife across the top to get their flashing in. And now your wrap is all unsealed at those transitions and intersections. So little things like that add up.
There is no way to seal step flashing. So you gotta be on that one.
Yeah.
We've used a peel and stick before that they can't cut. So like some ice and water shield, for example, or something in behind the truss, and then it's really hard to cut that with your knife. And then roofers know what it is, so they'll just stick to it. They won't necessarily try and cut it away. And either way, if you're doing torch on, they're going to burn it with their torch anyway. So something that'll stand up to that, and then you can attach to above and below. Seems to work really well. In our data collection, though, when we're looking at what's the difference between really high result and really low result, often, I mean, aside from all the planning and such we're talking about, but often it's also a significant factor is site supervision. It's just having that good site super that understands it and is not just the babysitter, but also a little bit of policeman, a little bit of handholder, and like we've talked about with a proper leader with a, you know, that's creating that team and that sort of we're all in this together mentality.
Yeah, definitely. I have one builder that has 3 framing crews, and we've tested enough houses for him now that I can tell which crew framed which house based on the results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They all pass, but they all vary a little bit.
Yeah.
Any practical insights from you, Clayton?
I mean, we touched about a lot of it already on there. Like I said, just being intuitive and what people are doing with installations. It's a key factor in actually being successful. And it's for everybody that's going to be there, right? Again, the framers are doing their job correctly. You have so many sub trades afterwards that need to be able to manage themselves to get the right product.
Okay, we have a couple minutes before we're going to move to the Q&A. So folks, just a reminder, we have the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can put your questions in, but we did ask folks when they registered if they had any questions for the panelists. So I thought I'd kind of offer that as a starting point. So it was a bit of a scenario-based of applied learning question that I think a lot of people can learn from. So the question was, a home is complete and ready for occupancy, but it fails the air tightness test. So what's the practical path forward, and how would you avoid getting into that situation in the first place?
Build a time machine. Go back in time. Don't do it again.
Practical step forward.
Oh, practical. Oh. One of my team actually told that to a contractor, and we still refer to it as the time machine incident. But apparently it wasn't good advice. I think that my opinion on this is a fail. If you're the same way, it should be treated in the same way as if you install a beam that was too small. Now, granted, like if your energy bills are a little higher, it's not a safety issue. So it's not quite the same as like if you put in a beam that's too small, but it's still building code, and a fail is a fail. And if you're not meeting the target at final, that is like similar to like an airline crash. That is a series of failures, not one single failure. It's a failure of quality control throughout the thing. It's a failure to test. It's probably a failure of design. It's probably a failure to communicate, all these different things. So you have failed a lot. You haven't failed in one single thing if you failed at final. And we have had it happen. It is exceptionally expensive. We've had contractors take finishes off the walls to fix the problem. And so the cost is astronomical, and any builder or homeowner building a building should be shaken in their boots about that possibility, and in doing so, mitigate their risk by doing that mid-construction testing.
Yeah, that's a pre-planned miss, right? Where you're only being reactive to try to fix something every time. And it's never going to be cost effective to only fix things.
And in trying to fix, there's other repercussions from that too, right? If we're talking about pulling materials off, like say we got to peel the siding off the entire house. Well, now that existing wrap that you have on has become a cheese grater. So it's not just, put a piece of tape here. It's rewrapping the whole entire house and resealing everything.
Yeah.
And is your siding reusable now that it's been removed? Probably not.
Yeah.
All right. So best case scenario is to learn from the insights of these panelists on this call today.
Do it right the
try to
first
avoid
time.
That consequence. Yeah.
I think the underlying theme is IDP and mid-construction.
Mm-hmm. Which is really just an extension of the IDP, right? Is to verify,
part of it.
You're continuing the theme along. We work together as a team in the start, and then we're working together as a team in the middle, and we'll work together as a team to finish it.
That's right.
It's a team sport. It's not an individual sport.
Teamwork. Love it. All right. We do have a question in the chat to start things off. And Leslie, you are right on target in terms of exactly the kinds of questions that I thought might come through, but it is around cost. So yes, there is. And folks, the panelists, you did all kind of touch on this individually, but we do hear a lot from contractors and building industry folk that there are additional costs of building to higher steps of the energy step code. So maybe any insights into how we can keep reduce this increase in cost that's related to higher steps?
I mean, I'm gonna say sizing right off the get-go. I know, like, obviously, if you're gonna be going to higher performance equipment, like there is gonna be a cost adjustment between a standard piece of equipment that's 90% and going to something that's 97%. However, when we're talking about making these changes, the consideration of how the house is constructed with windows, R values, insulation, air changes, determine that size of equipment to be something else and could be a part in like reducing some of the costs. There's still going to be an upgraded cost, but it's not going to be a drastic effect of, again, somebody just saying, hey, I got this on the shelf that's going to go in there. It's just going to be better.
I think one of the important things to think about when you're factoring cost is relative to what is a question you have to ask yourself. For a time, the idea of building to a higher performance, the addition of an ERV was considered additional cost. The addition of a heat pump was considered additional cost. The way the code is now, though, those things are pretty much required. So I really wouldn't consider those additional cost. So if you already have, an ERV or an HRV, depending on your climate and what you're going for, and you already have a heat pump because cooling is now mandatory, or at least you have to exhibit that or display that one room in the house won't go above 26, yada, yada. You really can hit those higher levels with very minimal incremental, adjustments to your technique and your strategies in construction. So, additional insulation costs money, and there is a cost to upgrade from double pane to triple pane windows if that's what you need to do. But the relative cost increases have come down, I would say. And I'm a firm believer that you could take your standard code built home that you're building right now and focus on those details for very little incremental cost, by way of, perhaps additional labor on some of your detailing and hit those higher levels. I think a bigger cost factor in upgrading a home is going from laminate to granite countertops, but nobody talks about it. They all want to know, how much more is this high performance home going to cost me? Well, how much more do you want to spend on your front door to make it have side lights and a transom above it? So you kind of got to be fair to the whole consideration. If you just want to hit a higher performance, but you're okay with standard finishes, it's going to cost you very little.
The other part that's not factored into the equation is the operating costs down the road. It's not going to take you use as much energy to keep it comfortable.
I have multiple clients. Like one client actually sent me their first annual hydro bill because they were blown away. They're actually producing an excessive amount of energy a year. But that has to do with how Enercan requires you to size the solar and all that stuff. But their only bill annually is literally their admin fee from BC Hydro. So it's, I don't know what that admin fee is now, but it's not a lot. So that is a factor. So if you can improve your home for very little in construction, and you can, I'm telling you, you can. You have to be smart about your design and then focus on your details. So you're winning at the end of that. You're getting no bills, no utility bills, or very, very little utility bills. And the incremental in cost during construction was very small. So these things they are achievable. It's really a matter of perspective.
Yeah, I think that point that Shay made is compared to what is the key thing for us as well too, because we're, for our development company, we're looking at buildings very, very similar, and our budgets are not sticking out. Like, these are CMHC funded affordable housing, and our budget is the same as the one down the street, and it's way, way higher performance. And so, I can't say that it actually does cost any extra. We've seen it in several occasions cost less. And if you take like a normal design without any consideration for performance, it's going to be expensive. That's going to cost more, and the performance will cost more. But if we take that into account at the start, like Clayton made a good point about upgrading equipment, it's going to be an upgrade in cost. That's true. But now I've got to find somewhere to offset that cost by simplifying the building. If I take 3 corners out of a building that's a whole lot of less corner bead under drywall. It's less framing, it's less this, it's less that. Now I'm probably offsetting the cost of that higher, more expensive heat pump thing. And so there are definitely ways to do it. I think cost is really the hot topic of the day, given, state of affairs, but it's not something that should be a key influencer in performance. It doesn't have to be. The horror stories that we hear where it's like, oh, it cost me $200,000 more to go to step 4 or whatever. That's people who are, something's gone wrong. Somebody's made a mistake, and that mistake may be in the design. We do see that in the very, very high end houses that we work on, the mansions, and rich people are people too. They need houses, but $200,000 in their context is less than what they're going to spend on the kitchen island. So it may sound like a great headline, but in the scheme of things, it doesn't matter. We are not seeing those high costs when we're talking about affordable or attainable housing. You're like thinking of like places like Royal Bay here in Victoria, where all the houses are these little boxes, about as cheap as it gets in our region. They're all, assuming they're hitting the air tightness, they're all hitting step 4, sometimes even step 5. So pretty easy.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have built, I guess, a couple of notable ones. We've built a house for a retired teacher who was on a pension, fixed income. That was a full net zero home. It was in 2020, so a few years ago now for sure. But at that time, we built that house for right around $300,000. And I know that sounds impossible. I would say that's impossible by today's standards also. But at that time, we managed to make that work. Very simple mechanical system. Was a heat pump with a single head and electric baseboard backup. A simple ERV. The finishes on the house were fairly modest, but it was not an unattractive house. It was quite nice, overlooked a lake. So it absolutely can be done. You just have to be diligent about your selections and your design and what you're putting into it.
You can change the floor, pretty hard to change the wall after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And I don't see other questions coming through the chat, but something that I know that we haven't touched on too much, and I think it just makes sense in terms of the fact that we're at EL on energy level 1 right now, but maybe we can touch on some challenges that you're experiencing regionally in terms of implementation of zero carbon step code specifically. I know we've talked a lot about energy step code, but if there's anything specific to zero carbon step code.
Gotta
my
be one.
Go ahead.
I say that's got to be a Mark 1. I'm
going to rant too long, so I was going to let you guys go first.
Yeah, the carbon step code is not it. It hasn't. I haven't been in the position to have to think about it much, to be totally honest with you. Gas is pretty expensive, and specifically in my region, right around the central interior of BC, it's high, and so switching over to a full electrification scenario has been pretty popular at that point. Not a tough sale. People kind of prefer and ask for it. So I haven't been in the position to actually really be up against trying to achieve carbon step code.
I haven't had to try and achieve it either. And for different reasons, as Shay, basically people are kind of head in the sand about it. We're not doing it until it's absolutely mandatory and necessary. But I do foresee where the issue is going to arise in my region is we are predominantly governed by oil and gas. That's kind of what our economy is based on here for the most part. And so it's very cultural. People like their natural gas around here. So it's going to be a tough conversation, and it's going to be a lot of learning and, sharing that slide that Mark has that shows, you can still have all these other good things. It's just certain things you need to change, and they're totally doable. And it's just like when step code came in to begin with, it's just shifting the mindset that things are being taken away and things are going to get worse and things are going to cost us more, and being told what to do and those kinds of things. But it'll come around.
I think what we have is like a regional anomaly. We do have areas that don't have the electrical infrastructure to handle full electrification. It's not a surprise, and it's not a secret to what's happening. But we have utilities that are managed by the same company, and unfortunately, bringing in some infrastructure to areas is difficult. And it's not difficult in the design aspect. It's difficult as they built many different areas here to support, a single family dwelling with a suite, but they were never supporting six. They never were or designing the systems around having six people or six houses on one lot. With the boost and infill and changes to that type of market, that's where we've been restricted to how much power can be there. That being said, going to electrification can happen. However, you're taking away certain luxury aspects that make people highlight this problem. So saying I can't have my induction range, I can't have my hot tub, I can't have my EV, like there's a lot of things that they're gonna have to take out of the house in order to accommodate mechanical aspects. So I feel like that would be the only kind of the biggest restraint that we have here, but something that will have to be taken into consideration in the future, how to get more. Because it's not going to be something that goes away, or it's not going to be something that changes.
Yeah. I think this is where like the Vancouver Island in particular really comes in with a bit of good news on this subject. And I really appreciate the Clean BC review and how they viewed this. And in that Clean BC review, the recommendation was that basically Climate Zone 4, Vancouver area, Vancouver Island can do whatever they want and go hard and fast. And everywhere else could maybe slow roll it a little bit. And the simple reason to that is that, there's very few houses built outside, relatively outside of the Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island. That's where the big population center is. And so as long as those areas behave themselves on emissions, everybody else, it's sort of small potatoes. I mean, the Okanagan certainly is a factor. It's big enough, but it's not as big of a factor as Richmond. And right now, like the highest gas use in the province is the Vancouver area and the highest prevalence of it, which is kind of seems a little wild. And it's the place that heat pump works the best. So I think those are the areas of low hanging fruit that we really can hit on. And, basically all the places that matter on Vancouver Island are already at EL4, and it has really been a non-issue. It was not a big transition. It was easy. There wasn't major disruptions. There was a lot of marketing. There was a lot of lobbying. There was a lot of noise making, from various different industries that felt they would be affected. In the end, a lot of those industries weren't affected at all. I'm thinking of like the fireplace folks, right? They weren't affected at all. For the most part anyways. I'm sure maybe there were some that maybe cut it because they weren't getting a gas connection now, but there was impacts, but in terms of affordability, in terms of ability to have a nice house that you can, really a non-issue in Climate Zone 4.
It really speaks to the clarity of that slide you had about what people can still have.
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to what's being taken away.
You can still have all the luxury you want, and it's all good.
Yeah.
So at the risk of sounding contradictory to my last statement, we have run into capacity issues. And so that does exist. On the smaller houses, it's simple. The full electrification isn't a challenge when it comes to going beyond a standard 200 amp service. But with a larger house or a more intricate design, we have run into that. And the options weren't great. For our clients that wanted to go full electrification, but simply couldn't fit all the loads into the house that they wanted to. And so we did run into that. Plus, the upgrades that you would have needed at the street by BC Hydro were quite costly. Mm-hmm. And so in those instances, the backup gas, a dual fuel or hybrid system becomes appealing. But Mark, as you were saying, the backup system is counted or not counted?
It is counted, but only slightly, because even in Vanderhoof, it's only minus 40 for 2-3 weeks a year, which means your furnace is only going to be running for that 2-3 weeks a year, according to my energy model. Now, the homeowner may do something different, but according to my energy model, so 2-3 weeks a year of emissions from your gas furnace is insignificant.
So and you're still going to
pass it easily. Yeah. And that to contrast that to what we're doing in Victoria, there is no need for a supplementary backup system in Victoria. So people installing that here are just wasting money because we don't need it. In your area, that's where when I say when it becomes practical, that's what I mean is that you maybe for some reason electric isn't practical, then we go to the gas. But in my area, it would just be a waste of money.
And we have lobbied to BC Hydro about this. I'm not quiet about it when I bump into a friend from BC Hydro, and they have come up with the build we're doing right now. It might even be the first one in Prince George, where we're using a 320 amp service that's now available from BC Hydro, that doesn't require an upgrade to the phasing at the street. And that's been a game changer. So we no longer have to sacrifice, additional loads, perhaps an outbuilding down the road or an EV charger or a hot tub or something like that, because now we have a 320 amp capacity to work with standard phasing at the street. So, so there is still options there.
On that,
Sorry, Michelle, we are just at time, so I'm going to wrap things up in respect of
that's okay. I can ask Shay's question off. My question to Shay.
Okay, great. Well, speaking of BC Hydro, we just wanted to wrap things up with a little thank you to our funders. So it is, and thanks to BC Hydro's funding, that we're able to offer this webinar series and all of our webinars for free for you folks on the call. And just a quick plug for the Home Performance Contractor Network. If any of you are also working in the retrofit space, this is the network you want to be a part of. It is the network that homeowners are able to access rebates through for their home energy upgrades. So connect with them at info@homeperformance.ca if you'd like to learn more. And that is it for me. We'll wrap things up here. I'll just, oh no, now I'm the presenter who can't figure out how to stop sharing. There we go. That's it for me. So thanks, a big thanks to our panelists, a big thanks to folks on the call. I really do appreciate kind of the broad perspectives and insights that you guys were able to offer. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.